COM and Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, fondly known as the mighty OGGO. Before we start, colleagues, I'd like to read you just a quick note that we received from our clerk this morning from Global Affairs. Says, good morning, Mr. Clark's staff has confirmed that he would be pleased to make himself available to appear before the committee September 4th or September 12th, if these dates could work or will work with them. If not, we can find another date after he returns from his leave, September 3rd. So, colleagues, if it's okay with everyone here, I'll seek UC to leave it with myself and the clerk to either work on September 12th for his appearance or at a later regular OGGO date. Perfect. I'll assume we have consent. Thanks everyone for that, and thank you, Mr. Clark, for clearing that up for us. We will now go to our two witnesses who are appearing virtual. I understand we have opening statements from both of them. So we'll start with Mr. Miller, please. Go ahead. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. I'm afraid you're muted, Mr. Miller.
Oops, sorry about that. Thank you so much for the opportunities to speak with you today. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of Parliament. I appreciate the opportunity to brief you on the New York City real estate market. I have been a real estate appraiser based in New York City for the past 38 years. As co-founder of the valuation firm Miller Samuel, our clients include domestic and international financial institutions, law firms, consulting firms, developers, co-op boards, condo associations, managing agents, individuals, government agencies, and federal New York State and New York City courts. I'm a New York State certified appraiser and have appraised more than 8,000 residential properties, most of them in Manhattan. In addition, as a U.S. housing market analyst, I have authored research studies in roughly 50 U.S. housing markets, including the New York City metro area. I hold the Counselors of Real Estate designation, am an Appraiser A member of the Real Estate Board of New York, and was a two-term president of RAC, a national appraisal organization specializing in providing valuation solutions for complex residential properties. In 2023, I testified in Washington, D.C. at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, the regulator of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, in front of the Appraisal Subcommittee. For the past 3 decades, my market research has been relied on by the media, financial institutions, and government agencies, including the Federal Reserve, the Internal Revenue Service, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the New York City Office of Management and Budget, and the New York State Budget Division Economic Advisory Board. I co-authored a research paper for New York University School of Law and the NYU Wagner Graduate School of Public Services Furman Center for Real Estate and Urban Policy, titled The Condominium versus Cooperative Puzzle, an Empirical Analysis of Housing in New York City. And that was published in the Journal of Legal Studies at the University of Chicago. I also teach market analysis as an adjunct associate professor of architecture, planning, and preservation at the Master of Science in Real Estate Development program at Columbia University. I am a New York State real estate instructor for both qualifying and continuing education courses, and serve on the New York City Mayor's Economic Advisory Panel representing the residential real estate sector. Within my research, Manhattan co-ops and condos represent about 98% of residential sales activity on the island. Since I began my professional practice in 1986, the housing market has undergone significant change with an expanding condominium market and a weakening co-op market. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. We'll now go to Mr. Elliman. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Over to you for 5 minutes. Or sorry, Mr. Abos. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
No worries. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of Parliament. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this hearing this morning. My name is Thomas Obo. I'm a real estate agent with Douglas Elliman, a U.S.-based real estate firm. We're founded in 1917. Along with my team, the Aaron Boisson Areas team, I support a diverse group of clients on real estate transactions in New York and elsewhere. It's our job to source and dispose of real property based on client needs and criteria. In this role, we provide expert guidance, market analysis, as well as marketing, purchasing, and sales advisory. We frequently participate in solicitations and RFPs. In April of 2024, we were awarded a contract and started work to support the Global Affairs Canada's initiative to secure a new official residence in New York for the Government of Canada. As you may be aware, New York City is one of the most dynamic and highest value real estate markets in the world. Midtown, a central part of Manhattan, is considered the business and diplomatic center of New York City, exemplified by an above-average concentration of international residents and organizations, and anchored by the UN headquarters on the East River. Midtown receives heavy investment from foreign governments. Traffic and logistics of a metropolis necessitates that organizations seeking active participation in trade must be located in or near the area. To mention a few, recent transactions include the British government investing $16 million, the French investing $14 million, Qatari investing $45 million, while the governments of New Zealand and Denmark both invested between $8 and $10 million. And I'll supply all these numbers in Canadian dollars as well at the end. To our knowledge, there is no major foreign government, and certainly none in the G20, that doesn't have meaningful real property investments for public representation in Midtown within 15 minutes of the UN. The 57th Street corridor in Midtown, that's been talked about a fair bit at these hearings, is colloquially referred to as Billionaire's Row because the area is home to rarefied residences overlooking Central Park in super tall skyscrapers built within the last decade. This includes penthouses with selling prices commanding from $40 to well over $100 million. Of course, like all of New York City, the 57th Street area is also a diverse real estate ecosystem. The neighborhood includes studio apartments that sell for under $1 million. The average price per square foot in this area, which is a common measure of value in New York real estate, is $1,749 per square foot. To support the OGGO's effort here today, I thought it would be helpful to detail the process we undertook with Global Affairs to secure the new official residence. As you can imagine, researching and evaluating properties is a deliberate process tailored to every client's needs. In this case, our client provided very specific criteria. This included a minimum of 3 bedrooms plus a den, accessibility compliance, proximity to both the Canadian mission and the UN, detailed security specifications not located in a co-op, a price point decided below $9 million, and offering separation between living quarters and where public duties take place. Further, the location and building should be attractive for these public functions to be well attended and building management accommodating for such duties to be performed frequently. Given these parameters, we presented 39 properties for consideration. The initial list was narrowed down to 21 properties in 7 neighborhoods for in-person visitation. After 3 days of visits, a final list of 4 properties remained. 2 were nominated for further consideration. One of these finalists did not pass a second security and design review, leaving, by process of elimination, the unit in the landmark portion of 111 West 57th Street, a building that will celebrate its 100th year next year, having been completed in 1925. This entire process was overseen by Global Affairs Canada, visiting New York City from Ottawa. With the selection process completed, negotiations with the seller to achieve the best possible price was supported by the unit being the last available residence in this landmark section. A choice location, but looking out on 57th Street and not over Central Park. The residence was purchased at a 40% discount against original asking price, 10% off the last asking price. Coming to a $1,750 per square foot after concessions, this is by far the lowest price in the building. It is 70% less than peer buildings in the neighborhood that sell well over $5,000 a square foot. Despite the property's desirable location for foreign governments, the price per square foot is also by far below the $2,600 a square foot spent by other foreign governments I mentioned earlier. In fact, the Government of Canada paid just below the average of a standard New York condo, which is currently at $1,764 for the second quarter of 2024, actually, per Jonathan Miller and his company Miller Samuel. In conclusion, it is our professional opinion that the Government of Canada, based on the criteria presented, the quality and final purchase price of their new official residence, has secured an asset that will serve the country of Canada for years to come, both fiscally and functionally. A savvy investment procured in a well-run process by a diligent team in Ottawa. We present our gratitude for the chance to participate in the process and to bear witness here today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll start our 6-minute round with Mr. Barrett. Please go ahead, sir.
I appreciate your comments at the opening of the meeting. It's interesting to hear that we've had a change of heart by Justin Trudeau's $9 million man, Tom Clark, and that he is now, after having previously said he would appear and then saying he wouldn't appear, and then saying that he was on leave. And then when his office was contacted by media, they were told that he was, in fact, in office, now saying that he is willing to meet. So we have very disingenuous, at best, responses from Mr. Clark. It raises all kinds of questions about who the direction came from for Mr. Clark not to appear as he had originally committed to this week. And this is, of course, in the context of a $9 million residence on Billionaires Row that is going to serve one person and duplicate existing space that the Office of Canada's representative in New York already has. And we heard from Trudeau government officials last week that they were incredibly proud of the $9 million Billionaires Row accommodations that they got for Justin Trudeau's pal, and said it never occurred to them. It never occurred to them that it would be optically bad to spend $9 million on a place on Billionaires Row for a member of the liberal elite, which I think that response, they're being unaware how out of touch this was, says everything you need to know after 9 years of Justin Trudeau and his NDP Liberal government. Mr. Clark had agreed to come to be here today, and he backed out, and now he's saying he will come on one of those dates. I will say, Chair, that let's preempt the conversation we'll have on the date that's selected, that if Mr. Clark doesn't come on that date, that he'll have exhausted every reasonable courtesy that this committee could extend him, and that as the motion did pass unanimously for him to be here, that he must be summoned because he will be in defiance of this committee's wishes. It's unanimous wish, and of course will have demonstrated himself to again not tell the truth, just like he did yesterday when he said he was on leave, but in fact was not. So we'll wait and see, but it's clear that this is an effort by the government to try and delay and distract from this latest $9 million scandal. So I have a question for our witnesses. In as brief an answer as possible, is Midtown East appropriate for representational space for a G20 country in your estimation?
Hi, thank you for the question. The quick answer is yes, it is. About 95% of the consulates in New York City are located in this neighborhood or just abutting this neighborhood. There's about 136 consulates and all but 7 are located there.
And to the other witness, sir, do you agree?
Yes, I agree 100%. The Midtown East and the Midtown Corridor in general, all of the examples we mentioned earlier in our opening remarks are based in that area, within about 15 minutes from the UN.
Okay, and just for my understanding, 466 Lexington Avenue is in that area. Just an audible yes would be, or no. You indicated yes, sir?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where the Consulate General of Canada in New York is located, is there. And so when we talk about the space that G20 and G7 countries have, we have space there. We have it in that key space. We have space that in 2018, the Government of Canada, financed by the taxes of Canadians, paid for upgraded space, representational space, meeting space, where meals could be served, events could be held, and meetings could be had at that address, at 466 Lexington Avenue on the 20th floor. But what we have now is a $9 million condo, and that condo is supposed to replace another condo that the government of Canada had procured. So my question is, what increased value will Canadian taxpayers get by having a duplicate, having a second location that's in a desirable neighborhood? Obviously, other countries are spending big sums of money. I'm not accountable to their taxpayers. I'm accountable to Canadians, as is this Liberal government. What is the increased value that we get by having a second space?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I can't speak to the value of a second space versus a first space, it is my understanding that there is an office space and a residence space, and that the residence space generally has a facilities requirement as well to be performing as a mission asset. And so needing that space sounds like the right choice for the government of Canada. The initial
just quickly, sir, what was your commission on this sale? Just the number, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question. The commission was pre-negotiated as part of the RFP process with the government of Canada.
And what was the number, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The commission that is received by agents during any sales process is always received by the selling party, not by the buyer's side. So the seller's party paid out a commission of 4% of the transactional value to our firm.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Kuzmirchuk, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And every time now I hear Conservative colleagues like Mr. Barrett speak, I'm reminded of the fact they made a video recently called Canada Our Home, in which they badly manipulated the truth and badly manipulated Canadians. And in that same tradition, I see Mr. Barrett mischaracterizing the communication between Mr. Tom Clark and the clerk. And so I wanted, through you, Mr. Chair, I wanted to ask the clerk to clarify and confirm that Mr. Tom Clark, from the beginning, was open to meeting with the committee, but simply was not available on August 27th and was looking for an alternate date. Can the clerk, through you, Mr. Chair, kindly confirm that for the record? What that original correspondence was from Mr. Clark, or excuse me, from GAC.
Well, the original email that I received on motion was July 24th. August 8th, there was email that stated, in Marc Olivier, MOG, our clerk's absence, to inform you that Tom Clark, Consul General of Canada in New York, would be available to appear on Tuesday, August 27, 2024. GAC is waiting for official invitation to be sent to them. So that was on August 8th. We received an email from the clerk de jure, as I jokingly call it, because MOG is away on vacation, that Mr. Clark, or Global Affairs, confirmed that he would appear on the 27th. Then on the 24th, we received information that he would not be appearing. And then yesterday, there was a bit of convoluted back and forth between the clerk and GAC. At the end, it came out, wait till September 3rd, we will discuss a new date. And then this morning, we received confirmation Mr. Clark would be available on the 4th or the 12th of September.
So, but as I understand it, because I've seen various comments on social media and elsewhere, Mr. Clark, through GAC, was working with our committee to find a time to appear at this committee. Is that correct?
The email I received from the clerk on the 8th said GAC had confirmed his appearance. On the 24th, they withdrew it. And then yesterday was, we'll see. Then it was, when he's back September 3rd, we'll find a date. Then this morning, we received confirmation of available dates. So it appears that it did confirm they're not available. Now, this morning, our two dates made available.
Yes, he's made himself available to this committee to appear. I wanted to get that on the record. I wanted to ask our witnesses here today, the listing price for the unit was 9.3 million Canadian. The government paid 8.84 million Canadian, which is $500,000 off the price. Can I ask how we were able to knock that price down?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question. The unit itself is located in the landmark portion of the Steinway factory building, a building that dates back about 100 years. And the development had originally seen some relatively high pricing and hadn't been selling at the pace they were looking to sell. So they were starting to reduce the pricing, which brought the pricing of the unit into the scope of parameters that the government of Canada was seeking to stay within. At that point, the unit that was selected by the client was the last remaining residence in this landmark tower, and as such, for the developer would be considered a success if they were able to dispose of the last remaining unit. So they were friendly to the negotiation position that we took for the government of Canada.
I'm looking at, you had visited 21 properties, as I understand, were actually looked at. It started as 39 properties, went down to 21 properties that were looked at. The value or the price varied between $8 million and $21 million. The Canadian government chose pretty much the lowest price property. Do you feel this was a good deal for Canadians and taxpayers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question. As per my opening remarks, we believe as real estate agents that this was a very attractive end price for a very attractive asset in a rarefied part of the city that is, per Mr. Miller's commentary, frequented by 95% of the government dignitaries from other foreign organizations. The government of Canada was able to secure the asset well below the average price that other foreign governments pay for their assets. So it's our estimation that it was a very attractive price.
Mr. Abbo, do you expect, in your experience, do you expect the value of this property to go up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question. We can't speculate, but we can certainly say that the Steinway building, as an example, is considered by many in the industry as one of the finest examples of modern architecture. They're certainly not going to be building many more of them, and there is only limited amount of space there. It is a prime location, so given that real estate is primarily around location and space and availability, we believe it will substantially increase in price over the years.
And
I'm sorry, we are past our time, Mr. Kusmirchuk. Mrs. Vignola, please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Miller, Mr. Ibo. Mr. Miller, when we talk about the median price in New York, and that price is equivalent to $1.6 million, that means that there are 50% of properties that are under that value and 50% that are above that value of $1.6 million. Let's take the median price of $1.6 million. What can a buyer aspire to purchase for $1.6 million in Manhattan? Where can he buy this property? Is it going to be well located?
Monsieur Miller?
Mr. Miller.
There's no translation coming into my headset.
Ah, ça va bien.
I would say it, but I'm not going to do that myself.
Mr. Miller, there is a lower down on Zoom. There is a, you'll see, I think it shows a planet. You can click on that. That'll do the translation. And I apologize. We should have done that in advance for both of you.
Thank you.
You found
said
it?
Yes. And that's your time, Mrs. Vignola. Sorry. we'll start from the we'll start from the beginning. Can you restart your question, Mrs. Vignola, please?
Oui, bien sûr.
Of course. The median price in New York is $1.6 million, which means that 50% of properties are sold for less than $1.6 million and 50% are sold for more than $1.6 million. What does $1.66 million, Mr. Miller, get you in New York? And is that would that building be located close to UN headquarters?
I'm sorry.
If Mr. Miller is unable to hear the question, I might be able to answer it.
S'il vous plaît, Monsieur Abel.
Yes, please, Mr. Abel.
So, if I understand the question correctly, you're saying that the average price of an apartment in New York City is $1.6 million, meaning 50% less, and median price, and 50% more cost more. And the question was, in what areas can you purchase such an apartment? And I think the answer, simply put, is you can purchase an apartment in pretty much every area for $1.6 million. That's a meaningful amount of money. However, once you start adding certain requirements to that apartment, you will certainly dwindle down the number of units depending on what area you're looking in. Mr. Miller's firm has a number of studies that can actually tell you exactly how much apartment per square foot you can get in each neighborhood in New York City. And I'm sure he'd be happy to share that with you.
Et à 1,6 million de dollars.
And for $1.6 million, well, what can that get you? What can you get in Midtown? Is it possible to get something in Midtown? And what would you get with it? Would that be appropriate for the consul's needs?
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I figured out the translation. 1.6 million US in Midtown would get you probably a studio apartment, which sounds like would not be adequate for the needs of the consulate.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abbo, Mr. Miller, you can chime in if you want to. In the description of the building and the unit, there are luxury aspects, for example, the type of walls, the type of floors, the amenities, the fridge, the stove. If these luxury elements were not included in the unit, would the apartment, without all the marble and expensive amenities, would that apartment still be sold at the $6 million US figure?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. The answer would be no. That the value of the property is the essentially sum total of the amenities that go into it. So the quality of the construction would be inherent in the value of the property.
OK. Donc, la même grandeur.
I understand. So the same size without those benefits would be a little less expensive, but less attractive for buyers.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. That is correct.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bachrach, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of our witnesses for appearing and helping us understand the context in which this transaction took place. a little bit better. The one thing that stood out to me was the price drop from 10.7, or sorry, the asking price, the drop in asking price from 10.7 million to 6.9 million. And I'm just wondering if that's something that is usually seen. Is that out of the ordinary? It seems like a fairly significant drop in asking price.
Thank you for the question. I'll chime in and maybe Mr. Miller will add at the end. It is fairly unusual to watch any type of real estate asset priced at one end and then reduced down to 40% without selling at that same time. There was a very specific dynamic taking place in that area, and actually, especially with that building, there was a transition in ownership, and there was a desire by the new owners to, in essence, transact. And so that willingness to transact turned out to be the benefit of the government of Canada.
Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Miller, do you agree?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do.
Okay. Looking at the appraisal that was done for the condo that was purchased, the appraiser notes cautious optimism when it comes to the long-term health of the Central Park South real estate market. It says, quote, "The neighborhood's enduring popularity and limited new inventory are likely to sustain long-term residential demand." Is that a view that both of you gentlemen share?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is that there is a distinct difference in the condo versus the co-op market. The Midtown neighborhood has seen it's essentially the central business district of Manhattan, and it has seen an influx of residential condo development, which is thought to be in the long run, we're expecting price growth going forward.
So just on the surface, it would seem that this is a reasonable investment if you're just looking at the chance that this property appreciates over, the years or decades that the government of Canada holds it.
Thank you for the question. I can't speak to whether or not it's a good investment. I can speak to the market conditions, and the market conditions suggest, and as we have seen for the past decade, that the condominium market has a more of a potential upside direction over the long term than the existing co-op market, which currently outnumbers condominiums in the market 3-1.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abbo?
I would agree with Mr. Miller's assessment, and thank you for the question. The area is still up and coming in the sense that there is a lot of new development that has been released now to the market, and that has been more or less adopted by the market. And again, with the continued influx of foreign investment into New York, we anticipate that will continue to grow up. We agree with the appraiser's assessment.
Thanks for that. Now, one of the criteria that led to the conclusion that the former property was no longer suitable had to do with rules imposed by the cooperative in which it was located that constrained GAC's ability to hold events at the property. I'm just curious, you noted that the current property is not located in a co-op. Are there any rules that constrain GAC's use of the property?
Thank you for the question. The rules of a condo building are very different from the rules of a co-op building. One of the reasons, like you said, that the government appeared to have a desire to move to the new location. The new location certainly has rules. Every building in New York City, I would imagine anywhere, has rules. We have actually acquired those rules and shared them with the committee, I believe, or they are on their way to you. But it is our understanding that upon review of those rules that they are severely less limiting than what a co-op bar was presenting in the past.
And Mr. Abbo, I don't know if we've gone over this already, but what precisely were the rules that were problematic at the former location?
Thank you for the question. So I can't speak to those rules exactly, as I was not the holder of the apartment, nor restricted by those rules. But in general, co-op boards are more restrictive. It is very focused on a specific type of family and family lifestyle, and not necessarily suitable for a public residence of the sorts of a Mission of Canada.
Now, at the Consular General's property, there are sort of these two separate roles. One, obviously, is this diplomatic role when it comes to entertaining other diplomats and high-profile officials and having events, that sort of thing. The other role is responding to the needs of Canadian citizens, particularly emergency travel requests. Are members of the public, so Canadian citizens who need emergency assistance with travel documents, that sort of thing, are they able to access the new property without any barrier?
Thank you for the question.
I have to interrupt. Just a very brief answer, please.
The condo, the new condo, has very strict security measures and several points of entry that are supervised. And so they would need to be cleared by the residents of the condo in order to access it. But if they were cleared, they certainly could access it.
Okay, Thank very much. Mr. Backrack, I'm glad you brought up the issue of the condo rules. Global Affairs actually promised us at our last meeting to have some information back on those rules that day or the very next day. I checked with our clerk yesterday, and they still have not gone back to us. So I'm glad you've brought it up with Global Affairs if you are watching this today. And I assume you have. You owe us those documents. You promised us those documents, or at least a response about it. So I hope you will get to providing it to this valued committee. Thank you for that time for the paid announcement. Mr. Brock, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to be directing questions to you, Mr. Abbo, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I understand that your real estate firm is currently the listing agent of 550 Park Avenue, Unit 12E, the existing Consul General premises. And I also understand that you played a part in the purchase of 57th Street. Is that accurate?
Thank you for the question. That is indeed accurate. We proceeded in two RFP processes, one for the purchase of the new official residence and one for the disposal of existing residence.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that. Now, Government of Canada officials, Justin Trudeau's government, Global Affairs, have confirmed that the purchase of West 57 was predicated on the fact that the Park Avenue property required, in essence, over $2 million in renovations. That it was originally purchased in 1961. It had renovations completed in 1982. And it was good enough for 19 previous consul generals, except for Tom Clark, who wanted a different location, and was granted that. Now, I think it's disingenuous, and I think it's actually a lie to Canadians when Justin Trudeau and his government are claiming that this property was essentially a fixer-upper. I think that could be the furthest from the truth, and I'm going to quote from your listing page for Park Avenue. A perfect example of the grand golden age apartments of the 1920s. This masterpiece is full of volume, scale, and ideal circulation. A great room with 11-foot ceilings and large windows that frame exposures to the north and east invite you into the heart of the home, while the adjacent dining room could comfortably host down a dinner of 18. Designed for hospitality, a commercial kitchen and a butler's pantry are further complemented by direct access to a separate staff office and storage room, as well as in-unit laundry, a den library just off the entrance gallery, as well as a powder room complete the northern wing. Along the southern corridor, 4 bedrooms, all with ensuite bathrooms and walk-in closets, and 2 with corner exposures offer privacy and comfort. With its high ceilings, large windows, herringbone walnut floors, and ample storage throughout, this residence offers the perfect framework for generation living and is truly a space to behold. That, sir, is your listing. That is hardly indicative of a New York City condo adjacent to Billionaires Row that demands $2 million worth of renovations. Would you agree with that?
Thank you for the question. It is a wonderful residence, and it will serve its owners very well. That has the needs that that residence will offer up. If those needs are no longer met, those residents will probably want to find another.
In your professional opinion, this is not a fixer-upper, is it? Move-in ready.
Opinion, that is not a fixer-upper.
Sir, this is move-in ready luxury, isn't it? In a heritage building.
It is move-in ready. It's a wonderful residence. It's in a heritage building. That is correct.
Correct. Now, did the government offer you any specifics on how they were going to spend $2 million worth of taxpayer dollars for renovations to Park Avenue? Did they offer any details?
We have not received any of that information.
Of course not. Did they even mention it to you, that one of the rationales for looking for a new location adjacent to Central Park in Billionaires Row was because of the $2 million expected to renovate this luxurious condo?
It was shared as part of the criteria, yes.
They shared that with you?
They shared that due renovation costs, it made more sense financially to pursue another residence.
Okay. They also told us at committee that it wasn't accessible. And when I drilled down on the government as to what that meant, they had to widen the entranceway to a bathroom. That could have easily been done on Park Avenue as well, couldn't it?
It is sometimes difficult to do work in co-op buildings, especially. Part of the reason why the cost is so high.
It's not impossible, is it?
Could be done.
It's not impossible, is it? Answer, please.
It is not impossible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bach. Ms. Damoff, welcome to OGGO. Go ahead, please, for 5.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. I want to read something from the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations from 1963, and one of the articles says that the role is to further the development of commercial, economic, cultural, and scientific relations between the sending state and the receiving state, and otherwise promoting friendly relations between them in accordance with the provisions of the present convention. So this consulate is responsible for $200 billion a year of business. Its role is to host events that promote Canada and businesses within Canada, and I don't think any of us would sneeze at $200 billion a year of business that's being generated through this consulate for Canada. That's a significant amount of money. And to portray this residence as simply a residence and not a residence and a place of business is misleading. You know, in 2021, we passed the Accessible Canada Act. Now, accessibility in these residences around the world should not have to be legislated. It should be the right thing to do. But the fact is that we need to make these residents accessible to people with disabilities, and to ignore that fact. And I would argue changing a doorway in a heritage building is not as straightforward as the Conservative members would lead people to believe, especially in a condo building. So, you know, the Conservatives bought this the previous residence under Mr. Diefenbaker in 1961. And oddly enough, under two conservative prime ministers, Prime Minister Mulroney and Prime Minister Harper, they felt the need that it was important to have someone in New York conducting business for Canada. And all of the sudden, they're trying to portray this as a political decision that somehow we're wasting taxpayers' dollars. I would say at $200 billion a year, it's a good deal for Canadians to have someone there who's representing our interests. And I would challenge any conservative to say why Mr. Mulroney, Mr. Harper, and even Mr. Diefenbaker felt that it was important to have this kind of representation in New York City. I have a question for Mr. Miller. You have talked about the need for appraisals to be for neutrality in valuations and the need to not have politics involved when you're doing that. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, please.
Thank you so much for the question. I'd be happy to. Neutrality in valuation, for example, our firm does a tremendous amount of matrimonial work between parties, and we're actually hired by both parties because we take the neutrality position very seriously. And neutrality essentially means that any appearance of non-neutrality would appear to the appearance of favoring one party over another is toxic or poison for the credibility of the final valuation. We found that over our experience that has resulted in much better outcomes for the parties if the person providing the valuation is not influenced or pressured by either party.
And Mr. Abo, just briefly, because I only have a minute left, you went through, and we've heard some of the requirements that the Government of Canada needed for this property, including accessibility, but there are many other ones. I suspect that narrows down the availability of residences significantly. I wonder if you could talk about that, and also whether you feel the Government of Canada made a good decision in selling the previous property because it didn't meet those guidelines and required significant repairs, and purchasing the property that we did purchase in New York City.
In about 20 seconds.
Thank you for the question. So briefly said, as we talked about earlier, there were 39 properties that we were able to find for consideration in the entire region or sphere of influence that the Canadian government decided to be in. 39. That's not a lot in tens of thousands of apartments available in the area. So it was not easy to find, but I think they were very successful in their final decision. And when it comes to whether or not it was a wise decision to dispose of the current residence, we believe now is a good time for that, and we're happy to participate in it. So we think both decisions were smart moves driven by criteria already set by the Global Affairs.
Thanks very much. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Miller. What seems striking here in all of this for people is the figure, or rather the name, Billionaires Row. It's a very striking image, and that's where the apartment is located. I can only imagine there are other places in New York that could be called Billionaires Row. The name might be more attractive. But is there a bit of everything in this area, or it's really an area where there is an immense number of rich people with regard to other areas in New York?
Thank you so much for the question. The answer is, and I believe Mr. Abo mentioned it as well, that there's quite a diverse mix of residential properties in the area. It is primarily a commercial district that has seen an influx of development, especially after the financial crisis, where we saw, really, we're talking about 8 or 9 super talls that were constructed post stock. Prior to that is not that type of property at all.
Et j'imagine que
And I imagine that if it was called Crappy Row, nobody would move there, right?
Thank you for the question. The phrasing Billionaires Row is a marketing term, something that Manhattan or New York real estate is well known for. It's an aspirational name, but it does not reflect the majority of the housing stock in that location.
merci.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Abo. Mr. Chair, I yield the floor.
Thanks very much. Mr. Bachrach, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for Mr. Abo, you were fairly intimately involved in this transaction, advising Global Affairs and looking at other properties, talking to them about their requirements. At any point, did you have any interaction with Mr. Clark, the Consul General?
Thank you for the question. During the process of selecting, sourcing, visiting, and reviewing from 39 properties down to 21, down to 4, down to 2, down to 1. I did not meet with anyone from Mr. Clark's office. Once the selection had been made, several individuals from Mission, including Mr. Clark, came to tour the property as part of, I would believe, a final vetting of some sort. But this was after the decision had already been made that they were going to proceed with that property.
Okay, thanks for that. And turning to the former property that Global Affairs owns and has listed on the market, are you familiar with that property?
Yes, I am familiar.
And perhaps this is a question for Mr. Miller, who's a little bit less closely tied to these transactions. The property is currently listed at $13 million, a price at which Global Affairs, and the government of Canada would realize a profit. Yet we see with the newly acquired property, the asking price had to be reduced by about 40% before the property sold. Is $13 million a reasonable asking price in your approximation, or would you expect that it would sell for considerably less than that?
Because I have not, as a licensed and certified appraiser, because I have not looked at the specifics of the property, only the market that it sits within, I'm unable to answer your question professionally.
Can you provide any sort of comment on the amount below asking price that properties like this are typically selling for, percentage-wise, or is it all over the map?
So on average, thank you for the question. On average, the Park Avenue market, we're talking somewhere between 5 and 10% below the original ask if it's priced correctly.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Right on time. Mrs. Block, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I will let you know that I will be splitting my time with my colleague, Ms. Kusi. Mr. Abo, you mentioned in your opening remarks and again in one of your most recent responses that there was an initial list of 39 properties. Can you table that list with the committee and include the locations and prices, please?
Thank you for the question. We'd be happy to.
Thank you very much. And quickly, I'm going to follow up on a couple of lines of questioning by a couple of my colleagues. Mr. Abo, I thought I heard you say that you were made aware by GAC of the need for renovations, but not to the extent that they have indicated to the committee. Can you tell me what the impact on a unit, on the sale price of a unit, would be knowing that there are significant repairs needed for that?
Thank you for the question. I think the easy way to answer it is that as you tour a new property, depending on the requirements of the buyer, those repairs will either be important or lesser important depending on the final use of the property. In the specific case of 550 Park Avenue, the pricing that has been set went through a very rigorous process that we always apply to any residence that's being posted for sale. And included in that consideration is the potential need for repairs to be decided by the final purchaser, of course.
So really quickly, the price included what GAC had indicated as the need for $2.6 million in repairs. The price set on that unit reflects that?
The price set for the unit reflects that there is a potential for what we call upgrades to the unit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My first question is for either witness. Do either of the witnesses have knowledge as where the current Canadian representative to the United Nations resides?
I can answer that question. I do have knowledge.
Please go ahead.
Should I share where he resides? Okay. Is that public information? I'm not sure if...
Well, if it's the same information that I have, it's that he currently resides in the Park Avenue residence of the former residence of the same building of the former residence of the Consul General. So this is my understanding, and this is my understanding that it is, and I'm seeing you nod, so that it seems to be you're in agreement that you are. So it's very interesting to me. Does the current Canadian representative to the United Nations have any plans to sell this resident, to leave this building and find another residence? Are you aware of that?
Thank you for the question. I believe that's a answer best provided by Global Affairs. I am not aware of a current plan to dispose of it.
Interesting. It's just very interesting to me that this previous residence was not good enough for the Consul General, yet somehow it remains good enough for the Canadian representative to the United Nations. There just seems to be some type of disconnect there, that this residence was good enough for one Canadian representative in NYC, but not good enough for the Consul General. Very interesting. Mr. Chair, I'm just going to summarize in saying how very disappointed I am in this government to see value for money for Canadians comparative to the previous Harper government. The previous Harper government sold the Dublin residence for $10 million. We sold the entire Hong Kong mission for $86 million in 2016. We sold McDonald House for $530 million. This was above asking price, unifying two buildings in purchasing the house next to Canada House for a savings of $250 million. And finally, Mr. Chair, I'll note that we listed our Coral Gables, the official residence in Miami, a residence I have visited, for $5.2 million. In closing, Mr. Chair, I'll say, under the previous administration, the Harper government, we sold more than 80 diplomatic properties for more than $720 million. This is the type of value for money that Canadians deserve, and Liberals should come to understand this. Thank you very much.
You're here. Thank you, Mrs. Kusi. We'll finish up with Ms. Atwin, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good to see everyone, and thank you for our witnesses for being with us today. I think I'll start, Mr. Miller. Can you just talk about how does the New York real estate compare to other major markets? How does the market compare?
The New York City, specifically the Manhattan market, since we're talking about it, is one of the highest, if not the highest, priced housing market in the United States. It's certainly both on the purchase side and the rental side are both at the top of the list. This has been, I've been in the market since the mid 80s, and this has been a consistency of the market. The challenge of the market is adding new supply. It's very expensive and difficult to build in the market. Manhattan there's very little excess land. And so the product that comes into the market tends to skew towards the higher end of the price range.
Great, thank you very much. And Mr. Abo, the property listing for the condominium at the 111 West 57th Street describes the property's modern conveniences within grand spaces and describes various amenities to which residents have access, such as an 82-foot swimming pool with private cabanas. To what extent do property evaluations and appraisals consider the value of such amenities in assessing market value?
Thank you for the question. I think that maybe Mr. Miller will want to answer that on the appraisal side. From the broker's side, and we can talk to that most new developments use the amenities and additional facilities as extra ways to entice residents to come live with them rather than in the neighboring building. And so it's used primarily to create additional value. I would say the caliber with some of these facilities also do stand the test of time and will potentially help in maintaining value of a residence as well.
Great. And Mr. Miller?
Yes. Think of the amenities as a suite of things that help the property be established at a certain value point within the market. It is, usually properties of a high caliber have a certain minimum number of amenities that are expected by potential buyers. And in the Midtown location, for example, about 85% of the new development condo purchases over the last decade have been by international buyers, 85%, and that would be just the opposite downtown. So there's something about the amenity suite that's being offered in Midtown that is attracting this market.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so on 21st of August, our last committee meeting, we had officials from GAC, and they estimated that the life cycle of this residence would be between 55 and 60 years, and that its value would appreciate during this time. Would it be reasonable to assume that the new official residence at 111 West 57th Street will appreciate at a rate higher than inflation over this period? And could you possibly explain that?
Thank you for the question. So I would be in agreement that because of the restraint on supply in the market, especially in the new development space itself, that the runway or the period, 50, 60 years down the road, it would be a reasonable estimate to assume that the price growth in the property in the long run would be at or above inflation levels.
Great. I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. Mr. Miller, we'll book you for 50 years from now to see if your prediction holds true. Colleagues, if you want to put that on your calendar for 2074. Witnesses, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Everyone will get back to you once we talk to everyone involved regarding Mr. Clark. With that, we are adjourned.